Um, First of all, it must be a ugly, rainy, slow day in sports today. So I appreciate y'all coming out just just to get a little recap on our season and sort of flip the page and think about the exciting parts of this year and then also what's ahead of us for the future. But I do want to start off by saying that one of the intentions of our staff and our players and everyone surrounding our program when we arrived here 5 years ago was to not only get Texas back to a competitive level nationally, but also to gain some interest in the community and gain some fan interest and try to grow our fan base again. And quite honestly, to get you guys interested in us again. And I would start off this by saying how much I appreciate your coverage of our team. I think it's been the best that it's ever been. I think that the excitement that you all help us with in spreading the word of Texas basketball has been tremendous. And I think sometimes we gain a little more appreciation when we win, but I think also I just appreciate the fact that y'all are interested in our program and that you're willing to get out and cover the human interest stories of our team, but also the fun stuff about the team atmosphere. So I would start off wholeheartedly in thanking the media and thanking our fans for what really was a fun ride this year. It was a definite roller coaster. I would say ride is a good word, but it was fun. And I started this year off talking about how fun this team was and fun-loving and sometimes frustrating because they did take things not so seriously sometimes, but in the same breath, it was the best part about this team was that they were fun to coach. They were young. It was a process to get them to understand the level of competition. It wasn't a process to get them to buy in, and it wasn't a process to get them to work. But I think just to understand the level that you have to play at on a daily basis was a journey for our team. I thought, just reflecting back, which I've had time to do, that we didn't reach a couple of ultimate goals. One of them was the Final Four, and one was to win a conference championship. I think we are most certainly headed in the correct direction. I think when you talk about where we started 5 years ago and now we're contending for conference championships and we're really a shot or two away from one with a young team, makes you excited for the future, but also makes you proud of where you are. I mean, we've won over 50 games in 2 years. That's a lot, and that's a lot of hard work by a lot of people. So I'm really appreciative of our staff, our players, our commitment from our players to be the best they can be. And I thought we had some really, really good highs this year, a 19-game win streak. I wouldn't even say we had a lot of lows, even though we started off slow. All of those were learning experiences for our team, and I thought some of them were needed for us to get to a better place. So I'll take some questions.
Other than the obvious about not being able to get to where you ultimately wanted to get, are you pleased with, and we've talked about this progress thing, you go from losing record to second round, a Sweet 16, Elite 8, and even though it didn't take that next, because of the things that you just mentioned, is it easier for you to balance that against the fact that this was the first time in 5 years that there wasn't that next incremental step forward?
Most definitely. First of all, I mean, there's only one team in NCAA basketball that ends their season happy. And the rest of us are trying to figure out how to get to that place. So I just think we're in a good place, Craig, that we are talking about Final Fours. And that when you set your goals at the beginning of the year, they're not what they were when I first got here. I mean, that we had very simple ones. And now we're at a place where it's a conversation that can be had and should be had within our program. And I think Brooks said it when we beat North Carolina State pretty simply, that making it to the Sweet 16 should be an expectation at Texas. It should be a standard. And I think what you do after you get to the Sweet 16, some of it's matchups, some of it's maturity, leadership, the grind of the season, and where, are you fresh or are you not? All those things come into play once you get to that second weekend, and it's really, the minutes are mounting and all of that. And I think that sometimes your season ends before you want it to, and sometimes it doesn't. But I think the fact that we're talking realistically about having a chance to go to the Final Four and being one of those programs that is in the conversation is where we should be, most definitely. And I say that because I understand the journey. I mean, I understand the process that it takes to become a yearly contender. And I think Dawn's season this year and Dawn's evolution of their program at South Carolina is a great example for any coach that is willing to put their time in and willing to go through the ups and downs of a season and the ups and downs of, sometimes losing kids or losing, coaches and all those things that happen along the way. She stayed with the process. And I think any young coach or anybody that's trying to take over a program and get them to a national championship level has to understand the process and has to have some patience with that. And I only say that because my years at Charlotte, I played Dawn every year. And that was her first 4 to 5 years there at South Carolina. And, I beat them in the NIT. She wasn't supposed to be in the NIT. And those were just the years of process that you have to take to get your team to a championship level. And I think she's on her 11th year there at South Carolina, and they are clearly a championship team and a championship program. So I think that even though I'm an impatient person and I know that the fans at Texas and our expectations are what they should be, I do think that I have to have some patience with the steps that have to be taken.
Just building a little bit on what you're saying there, talking about the process and the patience. When you take a step back, do you feel like all the pieces are here that you need to take that final step and it's more about just experience and time, or do you still feel like you need to add, something here or there?
I think we've added some of probably the pieces from a personnel perspective on our team. If you were to look at this team this particular year, one of our weaknesses was shooting from the perimeter. I think everybody could see that. Maybe sometimes just being able to grind out a bucket in the paint was a problem for us at times. And when you look at we have to have an answer for Kelsey Lang graduating, and we have to have an answer for Bree, who was our best defender. I think we'll find those answers. They'll be a little different looking, I think, but Jatari White will add a dimension in the paint that we at times just didn't have, which was just, can somebody go get me a bucket down low? And I think Chastity Patterson and Rella Booth both will give us some perimeter shooting that will open up some things for other players. And I say all of that, and remember that they're going to be freshmen and newcomers. So what I'm really most excited about is the mindset of our team right now today. And they're a hungry team. They don't look like someone that's ready to sit around and wait till July for the second session to start and us get going on next year. They look like they've started today. And it's a little bit of a different feel than what we had last summer. I think we'll see some returners that look a little different next year too. And I think shooting is the obvious thing. If you look at, we're going to defend. There's not any question about that. But I think if you looked at our team, you would think that we need to shoot the ball better, and we will.
Coach, how nice was it to see Rella and Chastity the way they played in that McDonald's game?
Well, the one thing I will tell you about Chastity is that's pretty legit from a sense of what she brings to the table. When we started to look at her class and our needs, one of our needs was very clearly a three-point shooter. And even though Chastity is being labeled as a point guard, and she is, we recruited her for her shooting abilities. And knowing that Brooke and Shug would be point guards also. We thought that we could have a little bit of a three-headed monster with players that we could move around, sort of like chess pieces, and be able to shoot the ball better. Chaz is a legitimate shooter, and she will bring something different to the table for us for sure. Rella's, I mean, you kind of take those All-American games with a grain of salt sometimes, and she definitely made some shots. Rella is a scorer. I wouldn't say that she has a label or a position, very much like Joyner. But she does have the capabilities of stretching the floor. But again, I say all of those things knowing that those expectations get pretty heavy, and freshmen have a lot to process, and there'll be a learning curve for them. But the fact is, they can shoot.
Coach, the Mississippi State obviously had a great run.
Sure did.
And the girl, I can't remember her first name, William, had 41 against
Morgan.
Baylor. Morgan. And
I remember her when we played them.
I figured. And, she obviously had the big shot against UConn. One of the things about your team near the end of the season was there were a lot of games when Brooke wasn't even able to get off a shot. Can your coaching staff do something in the summer to free her up, find ways, different screens, different things like that she's such a great player, and you need that.
I think that's where the progression of Shug Sutton will be enormous for us, and I think as you saw late in the tournament, in the Big 12 tournament and the NCAA tournament, Shug looked like the light bulb was kind of coming on, but it was late, obviously. She had her best minutes of the year in postseason play. She will free up, as did Selena the year before. She will free up opportunities for Brooke to get shots in different places than for her to have to always create. There's definite improvement on our team that needs to be addressed as far as setting screens, those types of things that are pretty technical that we need to be better at. It will be, it's a little bit different for Brooke to have to run off of screen. She's always been able to create shots or get in a position where someone was creating for her. And when I say that, by drive and kick and those types of things and creating and playing in space, I do think Shug's progression will be huge. And we recruited her for a reason. She is a really good basketball player that just sort of got behind the 8 ball pretty quick because she came in with the ACL reconstruction. And you know how that is. I mean, you hear that old saying, it takes a year to become who you were after an ACL tear, and I think that you're going to see a different Shug Sutton next year, and that will change the dynamic. But I will say that we need to work on being better screeners, and Brooke's got to work on moving without the ball a little bit better than she probably ever has.
Will she be a two-guard?
She'll play it some, yeah. I think we now have the capabilities of being able to move the pieces a little differently with Shug being a year older and the insertion of Chastity also.
The number may be off by 1 or 2, but next year's roster should have 9 McDonald's All-Americans on there. Will this next year's team be the most talented team you've coached?
I mean, I don't mean this in any kind of negative way at all, but titles and that stuff, they that all gets erased when they get to college. And I think that if we mature, like I think we can, and the players that come in here as freshmen and newcomers, if they buy into the process this summer of how much work that it takes to be a championship team, I do think that we have the ability to be as well-rounded as we've been at every position as we've been since I've been here for sure.
Coach, on a bit of a broader scale, how important is it to this game that someone besides Connecticut won it this year, and how important was it for women's basketball to have that one shot heard around the world moment that piqued people's interest besides just fans of women's basketball?
I'm not going to say I'm happy they lost. You know, they come in here next year, so I'm not going to. I tell you what, the whole championship atmosphere in Dallas, and I would remiss in not commenting on what a fantastic job the city of Dallas did at the Final Four. It was as good of an environment, and I think that goes back to how hard people worked to sell tickets. We all talk all the time about how players want to play in an atmosphere that's sold out, and a big-time atmosphere, and that was it. It was the city of Dallas did a phenomenal job, and all the people that were involved with the Final Four, just huge kudos to, because it was a fantastic environment, and who knew that it was going to end up like that with that type of game going to the wire, and a little bit of a Cinderella story with Mississippi State. Morgan Williams was on such a tear that it made it even more exciting, because you have that little one that's hitting all those shots, and it just made for a really amazing environment. And then a new champion. I think, I don't want to say it gives everybody hope. I mean, UConn just signed a buku of players, so they didn't graduate but one, I think. So one or two. So they'll reload as they always do, but I do think that it was good for our game that there's a new champion. I mean, I think that's always exciting. Not necessarily saying that it would give everybody hope that everybody's going to win it, but I do think that it made for a very exciting atmosphere. And if you look at the ratings, they were off the charts for the Final Four. I mean, off the charts. So just kind of putting all that together, I think that was very good for our game. And it was a good time for Texas, because I think we had some I mean, I didn't mention our Sweet 16 environment, but the NC State game here was one of the best games of the tournament. And I've had tons of people talk about how they watched that game and how good it was, and beside maybe the 52 fouls, or the 52 free throws, but it was a really, really good game for our fans. And it might have made a few more people pay attention to the women's game, and had, then you get a few more people watch the game because they saw our game against NC State, and now they watch the Final Four, and you see that, then now you have a few more fans than you had previously. So nothing wrong with a little competition.
Coach, after reflecting on the season, what for you was either the best game, the highest point, the turnaround moment, something that made you click or made the team click? What was the best part for you for the season?
I think I wouldn't really sort of go into one moment necessarily, but I do think that the month of January and on into February was fun to watch, because it took so long for our team to figure out how to practice at a high level and how to get prepared. And to watch them go through that adversity the month of November and early December, and how they really could have kind of checked out on us, and they didn't. And then to see them start to put it together in January and February, I would just say that process was really fun to watch, and it was fun to be a part of.
Coach, the new arena is going to be built here whenever, but soon enough, I'm sure. The positives that you take from that?
Well, I mean, it's always sad to talk about this building not being here anymore. It's an iconic building in the state of Texas, and I think even nationally, and definitely in the world of Texas basketball in all ranks, high school, college, all of that. And it's a little bittersweet to have that conversation. I hope I get a piece of the floor at some point, but it's always fun to turn the page at some point. And an on-campus arena and all the things that go along with that is a really, really exciting thought. I was thrilled on Friday to get the news that President Fenves moved forward with, and I think when you have a vision, it's a little bit easier to talk about and easier to sell, and I'm excited that he's starting to bring forth the vision. Really excited.
There is all manner of speculation about how big it could be, should be, would be, all of that kind of stuff. Do you have a preference?
I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily that I have a preference. I think that, I mean, I'm not in the business of going around looking at arenas and seeing which one is best and all that, so it would be hard for me to say, but I do think an atmosphere that makes it a little more intimate,
Fans are close.
whatever that is, whatever that means. I don't mean that by size of the arena at all. I just mean maybe configuration or something like that would be fun to see what we could create here, and exciting for the students. I think the on-campus arena is really an exciting part of that, is really just the students' involvement, and anything we can make it, any way to make it more accessible for the students, I think is a huge plus. But I wouldn't, I mean, I don't know. I like watching the concerts here and all that, so I don't have I definitely don't want them to not be able to do the things that we've been able to do here in the Irwin Center for all these years, which includes a lot of things for the city and the community. So that's not my area at all.
It just needs to be big enough for Adele to come.
I would think so. I think that that's probably pretty important.
Coach, you talk about there being a different feel with this team. You can see their hunger. What did being in Dallas do for you? I mean,
It wasn't really that exciting. For me, because I was disappointed. I have to admit that, and it was hard. It's hard sometimes to go sit and watch when you wish you were there, and but I'm a big advocate of the women's game, and I went and sat and took it all in, and but I just was really impressed with what Dallas did. It took some work, for sure, and I know that out of everyone, they were probably disappointed that there wasn't a representative from the state. And sorry about that. My watch started working all of a sudden. Hasn't worked in like months. I'm sure everybody was disappointed, but it was amazing. It was an amazing environment, but I wouldn't say that I was happy to be there and not be playing. It's a good, I mean, for coaches, we go try to learn a few things. It's our convention, so we all go up there and network, and I'm on a couple of boards, so I was pretty busy while we were there. You get to see some former players that are in the profession now. So I mean, we have 2 or 3 former players that are GAs across the country right now, or video coordinators, and it's always neat to see colleagues that you've worked with.
But I mean, did it get your fire burning?
It was burning before I got there. Trust me, it was burning before I got there.
Coach, you brought up South Carolina earlier. What do you see yourself? Do you see your team similarities between the two? Not just necessarily this year, but the way they have progressed to the way you guys are progressing.
I mean, again, I'm not trying to make comparisons between anybody and our program. I haven't had the opportunity publicly to congratulate Dawn and to be able to say that I admire her journey, because she's had setbacks and things, lose players, gain players, lose games, win games, injuries, and she persevered through that, and I think that's a good example for all of us. But I wouldn't say there's a definite comparison. I think we're in a good place. And I'm definitely not trying to compare us to any other program, but I am very pleased with where we are 5 years later. I mean, how can I not be? We have a level of talent that should be able to compete at a very high level.
Yeah. One of the very visibly marked differences, and I think it's a benefit of the women's game as opposed to the men's game, is the abundance, the amount of high-profile games that are played in non-conference. I mean, there's you see it in the men's game with a game here and a game there, but there's several, and the highest caliber programs are usually playing the most. Your group is now in that group, in Florida State and South Carolina, Mississippi State. Given what the grind and everything they had to go through, is it still to you kind of an evaluative process to see how much is the right amount and how much might be pushing the envelope to too much and balancing home versus road on all of that?
I think that is a process, and I think that was the ongoing question this year was, did we give our team too much? And I don't know that I'll ever know the answer to that, but I do think that it is important to try to find some balance in that and be willing to go outside of the realm and play a non-conference game, maybe in the middle of conference play, to test the waters, but also put your team on a national stage and get them used to playing in that environment. I think that's important, and we'll continue to do that. I do think that this year's schedule coming up has a little more balance. I mean, we do play, I believe, as far as I know, we play UConn in the middle of conference play here at home, but there's a little more balance in the non-conference schedule, and I think that that's a work in progress every year. Sometimes you just kind of get thrown a game and you have to make a decision, is this a good thing for our team or not? And you learn lessons probably every year with scheduling, good and bad. I mean, you have some teams out there that wishes they would have scheduled a few tougher games. So there is balance that you always have to keep in mind. And this next year's team also has the privilege of going to Italy in August. So we'll take a 10-day, 11-day trip to Italy, and you all are welcome to go if you want to. We're really looking forward to that. But that's we play 3 games, I believe, over there and have a chance to see a different part of the world, and I think that's going to be a really good experience. We have a few players that are being invited to USA trials, so it will be a busy summer for our team. And the balance with that, I think you have to know those years. If you have some things coming up with your kids, then you try to give them some balance in the schedule. I like our schedule this coming year. I think we've got some really tough games, a matchup with Tennessee at their place again, the normal one with that, and some other games peppered in that I think are going to be very tough.